Jasmine Washington's scream pierced the first-class cabin as scalding tea dripped down her face. The flight attendant's dismissive glance spoke volumes. "Just an accident," he muttered, tossing a napkin her way. Unknown to him, he'd just assaulted the Federal Aviation Administration's lead counsel investigating discriminatory practices at SkyRoute Airlines. Before we dive deeper into this shocking story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. If you believe discrimination has no place in our skies, hit that like button and subscribe to stay updated on stories of justice and accountability. Now let's see how this seemingly small incident unleashed a storm that would shake an entire airline. Jasmine Washington was not a woman who intimidated easily. At 34, she had already built a reputation as one of the most brilliant attorneys at the Federal Aviation Administration's Civil Rights Division. A Harvard Law graduate who had turned down lucrative offers from corporate firms, she chose instead to dedicate her career to fighting discrimination in the aviation industry. Her colleagues admired her sharp mind and unwavering commitment to justice, while those who found themselves on the opposing side of her investigations feared her meticulous attention to detail. On this particular Tuesday morning, Jasmine settled into her first-class seat on SkyRoute Airlines Flight 2187 from Atlanta to Chicago. She wasn't traveling for pleasure. She was heading to lead an investigation into multiple discrimination complaints filed against SkyRoute over the past 18 months. The airline had drawn attention for a pattern of incidents involving minority passengers and employees, and the FAA had finally gathered enough evidence to warrant a formal investigation. Dressed in a tailored navy suit with her natural hair pulled back in a neat bun, Jasmine opened her laptop to review the case files one last time before landing. She'd purposely booked first class to observe the service quality, knowing that many of the complaints centered around disparate treatment between white and non-white passengers in premium cabins. The first hint of trouble came during the pre-flight service. Flight Attendant Brendan Miller, a tall man with cropped blonde hair and a practiced smile, moved efficiently through the first-class cabin offering beverages to passengers as they boarded. Jasmine noticed how he engaged warmly with the white passengers, asking about their day and making personalized recommendations. When he reached her row, his smile noticeably tightened. "Water?" he asked, flatly, barely making eye contact. "Orange juice, please," Jasmine replied. "No ice." Brendan nodded curtly and moved on without responding. 10 minutes later, he returned with drinks for everyone except Jasmine. When she politely reminded him about her juice, he muttered a vague apology about forgetting and returned with it after serving 3 more passengers. Jasmine made a mental note of the interaction, but maintained her composure. As an investigator, she knew the value of observation without intervention. She discreetly noted the time and details in her phone, adding it to the evidence she would compile. The flight took off smoothly, and the first hour passed without incident. Jasmine observed how the older white businessman across the aisle received attentive service, with Brendan checking on his comfort multiple times. The young white couple in front of her were offered extra snacks with a friendly wink. The Asian American man, 2 rows ahead, received perfunctory but correct service. During the meal service, Brendan continued his pattern of subtle differential treatment. When it was Jasmine's turn, he placed her meal tray down with noticeably less care than he had shown to other passengers, nearly sloshing her water. "Chicken or pasta?" he asked, his tone suggesting he was already tired of her presence. "Chicken, please," Jasmine responded professionally, maintaining her dignity despite the growing discomfort of the situation. The real incident occurred 90 minutes into the flight. Jasmine had been working on her laptop when Brendan came through the cabin with a fresh round of beverages. He leaned across Jasmine to serve the white male passenger in the window seat next to her. As he stretched over with a cup of hot tea, his elbow suddenly jerked, sending the scalding liquid directly onto Jasmine's face, neck, and laptop. The pain was immediate and intense. Jasmine couldn't suppress her cry of shock and agony as the hot liquid burned her skin. Her laptop sparked and shut down, likely ruined by the spill. Brendan's reaction was what transformed the incident from an accident to something more disturbing. Instead of immediate concern or profuse apologies, his expression registered brief satisfaction before shifting to practiced indifference. "Just an accident," he muttered casually, tossing a single cocktail napkin onto her lap. He didn't offer medical assistance, additional napkins, or even acknowledge the severity of the burn. "I'll get you another napkin when I'm done with this service." The passengers around Jasmine reacted with varying degrees of concern and indifference. The white man next to her shifted uncomfortably, but said nothing. An elderly white woman across the aisle clicked her tongue in sympathy but quickly returned to her magazine. A middle-aged black man, 3 rows ahead, who had witnessed the incident, stood up with a handful of napkins and offered them to Jasmine with a knowing look of solidarity. As Jasmine dabbed at her burning skin, she felt a complex mix of emotions rising within her. The physical pain was bad enough, but the humiliation and obvious discriminatory treatment cut deeper. Years of training as a professional investigator battled with her very human reaction to being treated as less than worthy of basic dignity and respect. In that moment, Jasmine made a crucial decision. She would not identify herself as an FAA attorney. She would document everything while remaining incognito. This incident would become part of her investigation, providing first-hand experience of the treatment that had prompted so many complaints against SkyRoute. Taking a deep breath through the pain, Jasmine discreetly began recording audio on her phone and photographing her injuries. The burns were already forming angry red marks across her cheek and neck. Her blouse was stained, her case notes were soaked, and her laptop possibly destroyed. But Jasmine Washington had just gained something potentially more valuable to her investigation: irrefutable personal evidence of the discriminatory culture at SkyRoute Airlines. As the flight continued toward Chicago, Brendan avoided her section entirely, sending a junior flight attendant to check if Jasmine needed anything else. The message was clear. Her discomfort was an inconvenience rather than a concern. Jasmine sat silently planning her next moves, while documenting every detail of the incident and its aftermath. By the time the plane began its descent into O'Hare International Airport, she had transformed from merely leading an investigation to becoming its most compelling witness. The fluorescent lights of the airport bathroom cast a harsh glow on Jasmine's burned skin as she examined her reflection. Angry red patches covered her right cheek and neck, and blisters were already forming along her jawline. She gently dabbed at her face with a cool, damp paper towel, wincing at the contact. Her silk blouse was ruined, stained with tea, and spotted with small burn holes where the hottest drops had fallen. Thankfully, she always traveled with a change of clothes. Jasmine quickly changed into a fresh white blouse, applied burn cream from her travel first aid kit, and did her best to look composed despite the pain. She had a team waiting for her, and this incident had just made their investigation far more urgent and personal. As she carefully applied concealer to the worst of the burns, Jasmine's mind flashed back to previous cases she'd handled. The Muslim family removed from a flight because another passenger claimed to feel uncomfortable. The black executive repeatedly mistaken for a service worker despite his first-class ticket and business attire. The Latino pilot, whose credentials were constantly questioned by both passengers and colleagues. Each case had strengthened her resolve to fight systemic discrimination in aviation, a field that still struggled with diversity and inclusion despite its modern veneer. "This ends now," she whispered to her reflection, straightening her shoulders. The woman who stepped out of that bathroom was no longer just an attorney doing her job. She was a warrior with a mission. The conference room at the Chicago FAA field office was already set up when Jasmine arrived. Her team stood as she entered Tyler Reynolds, a meticulous white male attorney who specialized in regulatory compliance, and Zoe Parker, a brilliant Asian American data analyst who could find patterns in the most complex data sets. Their expressions shifted from professional welcome to shock as they noticed her injuries. "My God, Jasmine, what happened to your face?" Tyler asked, pulling out a chair for her. Zoe rushed forward with concern. "Do you need medical attention? Those look like serious burns." Jasmine set her briefcase down deliberately. "What happened to me is exactly why we're here," she explained, recounting the incident in precise, measured terms, despite her still simmering anger. She detailed Brendan Miller's pattern of behavior, the accident that seemed anything but accidental, and his dismissive response afterward. "You need to file a personal complaint," Tyler insisted, already pulling up the forms on his tablet. "This is assault regardless of the discrimination angle." "And you should see a doctor," Zoe added. "Those burns could scar without proper treatment." Jasmine shook her head. "I'm not separating my experience from our investigation. This isn't about me personally. It's about a pattern. I've just experienced exactly what we've been hearing in complaints for months." She pulled out her phone and played the audio recording of the aftermath, including Brendan's dismissive comments and lack of appropriate assistance. "I want this included in our official evidence. And I want to expand our investigation scope," she continued, moving toward the whiteboard. "Let's review what we already know about SkyRoute." Zoe pulled up her tablet and projected a data visualization onto the conference room screen. In the past 2 years, SkyRoute has received 37% more complaints from minority passengers compared to the industry average. The complaints cluster around 3 main areas: denied boarding service disparities in premium cabins, and security random checks that don't seem random at all. Tyler added, and internally, their workforce statistics show troubling patterns. Despite an applicant pool that's 43% non-white, their flight attendant hiring is only 18% minorities. Promotion to senior cabin positions shows even worse disparities. Jasmine nodded, the pain in her face a constant reminder of what they were fighting against. And let's not forget, they've settled a discrimination class action 3 years ago, promising substantive changes that clearly haven't materialized. The team spent the next hour reviewing documentation, building connections between individual complaints to reveal the systemic issues beneath. As they worked, Jasmine brought up another crucial factor. "We need to understand who we're up against." SkyRoute's CEO, Richard Blackwell, has a reputation for aggressive legal tactics and political connections, she said, pulling up his corporate biography. The screen showed a stern-faced white man in his 60s with steel gray hair and cold eyes. His company has fought every regulatory action tooth and nail, and he's got senators in his pocket thanks to generous campaign contributions. He also sits on the board of the Airline Industry Association, giving him significant influence over industry standards. Tyler frowned. "I've faced their legal team before on safety violations. They buried us in paperwork and procedural objections until the case dragged on so long it lost momentum." "Then we need to be smarter and more thorough," Jasmine declared. "I want to conduct undercover follow-up observations on multiple SkyRoute flights. Different routes, different flight crews, different passenger demographics. We need to document patterns that can't be dismissed as isolated incidents." As they formulated their strategy, a debate emerged about focusing on individual bad actors versus the system that enabled them. "This flight attendant, Brendan Miller, clearly needs to be held accountable," Tyler argued. "What he did to you was deliberate," Zoe countered. "But if we only focus on individuals, the airline can just fire them and claim they've solved the problem. We need to expose the corporate culture and policies that create these situations." Jasmine nodded thoughtfully. "You're both right. We need to connect individual actions to the systemic problems. One flight attendant's behavior doesn't create a legal case against an entire airline unless we can prove it's part of a pattern that management either encourages or willfully ignores." Their planning session was interrupted by Jasmine's phone. She glanced at the screen, surprised by the unknown number with SkyRoute's Chicago area code. "Put it on speaker," Tyler suggested. "Could be important." Jasmine answered professionally, giving only her name. Miss Washington came a polished female voice. "This is Amanda Hayes, head of customer relations at SkyRoute Airlines. I understand there was an unfortunate incident on your flight this morning. I'm calling to personally express our concern and discuss appropriate compensation for your inconvenience." Jasmine's eyes met her team members, a silent communication passing between them. This unexpected call could be an opportunity. "Yes, Miss Hayes, there certainly was an incident, though I'd characterize it differently than unfortunate. I'm available to meet tomorrow to discuss this matter further." "Excellent," Amanda replied, sounding relieved at Jasmine's apparent cooperation. "Shall we say 10 a.m. at our Chicago offices? I'll have our customer care package ready for you." After confirming the details and ending the call, Jasmine turned to her team with newfound determination. "Looks like SkyRoute is already trying damage control. They have no idea who they're dealing with." She touched her burned cheek gently, the pain fueling her resolve. "Let's prepare for tomorrow. I want to go in as a wronged passenger, not as FAA counsel. Let's see what they say when they think I'm just another complaint they can make disappear with vouchers and empty apologies." As they gathered their materials to continue work at their hotel, Jasmine paused at the door. "This isn't just about airline regulations or customer service standards. This is about human dignity and equal treatment under the law. Every person who boards an aircraft in this country deserves the same respect regardless of their skin color. And I intend to make sure SkyRoute learns that lesson, even if I have to teach it to them the hard way." The SkyRoute Airlines headquarters occupied a gleaming glass tower in downtown Chicago, its lobby dominated by a massive model of their flagship aircraft, suspended from the ceiling. Jasmine arrived precisely on time for her 10 a.m. appointment, dressed in a conservative gray suit that conveyed professional confidence while concealing her FAA credentials. The burns on her face were impossible to hide completely, despite her careful makeup application, and she had decided against trying. Let them see the physical evidence of their employees' actions. At the reception desk, she announced herself calmly. "Jasmine Washington. I have an appointment with Amanda Hayes." The receptionist's eyes widened slightly at the sight of Jasmine's burns before she recovered her professional demeanor. "Yes, Miss Washington. Miss Hayes is expecting you. Please take a seat and someone will escort you shortly." Jasmine had barely settled into the plush waiting area when a slender white woman in her 40s approached with an outstretched hand and practiced smile. Her ash blonde hair was pulled back in a sleek ponytail, and she wore a perfectly tailored SkyRoute uniform with executive insignia. "Miss Washington, I'm Amanda Hayes, Head of Customer Relations. Thank you so much for coming in today." Her smile faltered momentarily as she got a closer look at Jasmine's injuries. "Oh my. Those burns look quite painful. Has a medical professional examined them?" "I've handled it," Jasmine replied neutrally, observing how Amanda's gaze kept returning to her injuries with what appeared to be genuine concern mixed with corporate anxiety. Potential lawsuit calculations were likely running through her mind. Amanda led Jasmine through security doors to a conference room decorated with framed photographs of SkyRoute aircraft and smiling crew members. A leather portfolio and gift bag sat ready on the polished table. "Please make yourself comfortable. Can I offer you coffee, water, tea?" Amanda winced at her own mention of tea. Perhaps not tea, given the circumstances. "Water is fine," Jasmine said, taking a seat that allowed her to observe both the door and the window overlooking the executive offices. She noticed Amanda press a discreet button under the table edge before sitting down, likely alerting others that the meeting had begun. "Miss Washington, first and foremost, I want to extend SkyRoute's sincere apologies for the incident that occurred on your flight yesterday." Amanda began, her voice shifting into what was clearly a well-rehearsed customer service script. "We pride ourselves on providing exceptional service to all our valued passengers, and what happened falls far short of our standards." Jasmine remained silent, allowing Amanda to continue her corporate apology, which was long on general expressions of regret but short on specifics or accountability. As she spoke, Jasmine noticed Amanda never directly acknowledged the discriminatory nature of the incident or mentioned the flight attendant by name. "As a gesture of our sincere regret, we've prepared this care package for you," Amanda continued, sliding the gift bag across the table. "It contains premium skincare products for burn treatment, a voucher for 5,000 SkyRoute frequent flyer miles, and 2 complimentary first-class tickets to any domestic destination." Jasmine made no move to accept the offering. "Miss Hayes, do you believe that's adequate compensation for second-degree burns, a ruined laptop containing work documents, and the humiliation I experienced?" Amanda's smile tightened. We could also offer a cash settlement of $500 for your damaged property. Our terms would, of course, include a standard confidentiality agreement." "I see," Jasmine said thoughtfully. "Before we discuss compensation further, I'd like to better understand SkyRoute's policies. How are your flight attendants trained to handle beverage service in first class, and what are your procedures when a passenger is injured by a crew member's actions?" The question seemed to catch Amanda off guard. Most passengers focused on their personal compensation rather than company policy. "Well, our crew members receive extensive training on safe service procedures." As Amanda launched into general descriptions, Jasmine skillfully guided the conversation to extract specific information about training, complaint handling, and accountability measures. Each answer revealed concerning gaps in SkyRoute's approach to bias incidents. Halfway through their conversation, Jasmine's mind flashed back to a pivotal childhood memory. She was 7 years old, riding a public bus with her mother in Atlanta. When they sat near the front, the driver had pointedly announced that some people should move to the back to make room for other passengers, despite numerous empty seats. Her mother had firmly stayed put, later explaining to young Jasmine, "Never let anyone make you feel you don't deserve a seat at the front." That fight was won long ago, though some haven't accepted it. The memory strengthened Jasmine's resolve as the office door opened, admitting a tall man with a military-style haircut and a flight operations pin on his lapel. "Pardon the interruption," Amanda said, "but I thought it would be helpful to bring in Michael Thornton, the supervisor for the flight attendant involved in your incident." Michael gave Jasmine a cursory nod before taking a seat beside Amanda. His body language immediately set a defensive tone, arms crossed and expression skeptical. "I've reviewed the initial incident report," he began without preamble. "While we regret any discomfort you experienced, our flight attendant Brendan Miller is one of our most experienced crew members with an excellent service record." He described the incident as an unfortunate accident during standard service. "An accident," Jasmine repeated. "And did this accident report mention how he failed to provide proper medical assistance afterward? Or how he tossed a single napkin at me and said he'd get back to me when he was done with service?" Michael's expression hardened. "Passengers sometimes misinterpret actions during the stress of an incident. Our crew are trained to maintain order and continue necessary service functions even when minor disruptions occur." "Minor disruptions?" Jasmine echoed her voice, remaining calm despite her rising indignation. "Would you consider these burns minor?" She gestured to her face. "Or is it that you consider some passengers' comfort and safety more minor than others?" "I'm not sure what you're implying, Miss Washington," Michael replied coldly. "I think you understand exactly what I'm implying," Jasmine countered. "I've observed that SkyRoute has a disproportionate number of accidents and misunderstandings involving passengers of color. Would you care to comment on that pattern?" The tension in the room thickened as Amanda jumped in. "We absolutely do not discriminate against any passengers based on race or any other factor," she insisted, though. Jasmine noted she was now carefully avoiding eye contact. "Then perhaps you can explain why Mr. Miller has been the subject of 7 previous complaints from minority passengers, none of which resulted in any disciplinary action," Jasmine asked, revealing she had done her homework. Michael's surprise was evident. "I'm not at liberty to discuss personnel matters." "How did you access that information?" Jasmine smiled slightly. "Public records requests are a powerful tool, Mr. Thornton." As the confrontation escalated, Jasmine glanced at the photographs lining the walls, noticing a pattern she hadn't been surprised to discover. Every executive pictured was white and predominantly male. The company's leadership literally reflected the bias embedded in its culture. "Let me be direct," Jasmine said, leaning forward. "I believe what happened to me was not an isolated incident, but part of a pattern of discriminatory treatment at SkyRoute. Before I decide how to proceed, I'd like to understand how you've handled similar complaints in the past." Amanda and Michael exchanged uncomfortable glances. "We take all passenger concerns seriously," Amanda offered weakly. "Do you? Because my research indicates that complaints filed by passengers of color are 37% less likely to receive substantive responses or compensation compared to identical complaints from white passengers. Michael's expression darkened. Miss Washington, while we value customer feedback, I should caution that SkyRoute has an excellent legal team that vigorously defends against unfounded allegations. We've found that certain passengers can be difficult, and sometimes misinterpret standard service as something more sinister. The thinly veiled threat hung in the air, but Jasmine remained unmoved. I appreciate your candor, Mr. Thornton. It's helpful to understand SkyRoute's position on these matters. She stood gathering her belongings. I'll need time to consider your offer and my options. I'm sure we'll be in touch again soon. Amanda hurried to salvage the situation. Please take the care package at least, and do consider our settlement offer. We'd prefer to resolve this matter amicably. Jasmine accepted the portfolio containing the official offer, knowing it would serve as evidence later. Amicable resolution requires accountability, Miss Hayes. I hope SkyRoute understands that. As a junior staff member escorted her out, Jasmine activated the recording device in her purse, capturing every word of the conversation she could hear behind her. She's going to be trouble, Michael hissed. We should have legal review all her previous flight records, see if there's anything we can use. I don't know, Amanda replied, sounding troubled. Those burns were real, and if she goes public, just another passenger trying to leverage an accident into a payday, Michael dismissed. Let's not overreact. Their voices faded as Jasmine reached the elevator, a small smile playing on her lips despite her still painful burns. The meeting had yielded exactly the evidence she'd hoped for: defensive posturing, dismissal of legitimate concerns, and thinly veiled intimidation. All recorded and ready to add to her case file. What neither Amanda nor Michael knew was that Jasmine had left the building with far more than they realized. In addition to the recording, she had used her phone to discreetly photograph internal documents visible on Amanda's tablet, including what appeared to be their standard response protocols for discrimination complaints. As Jasmine stepped out of the SkyRoute tower into the bright Chicago morning, she didn't notice the security camera capturing her departure, nor did she see the live feed being viewed in a corner office on the top floor where Richard Blackwell, CEO of SkyRoute, was receiving a real-time briefing on the problematic passenger from Flight 2187. Find out everything about her, he ordered his chief of security. I want to know exactly who we're dealing with before this escalates further. The temporary FAA field office in downtown Chicago had transformed into an operations center over the past 48 hours. 3 whiteboards covered in notes, flight data, and passenger testimony dominated one wall, while monitors displayed real-time tracking of SkyRoute flights across the country. The smell of cold coffee and takeout food lingered in the air as Jasmine and her expanding team worked relentlessly to build their case. Zoe's flight to Dallas boards in 20 minutes, Tyler announced, checking his watch. That makes 5 SkyRoute flights we're monitoring today. Jasmine nodded, applying a fresh ice pack to her burns, which had begun to blister despite her careful treatment. Good. We need comprehensive data from multiple routes and crew configurations. Their operation had rapidly scaled up after Jasmine's confrontational meeting with SkyRoute representatives. The team's data analyst, Zoe Parker, was now going undercover on flights, documenting service patterns and engaging with other passengers. Her Asian American identity offered valuable comparative data on how different minorities were treated by the same crew. Zoe adjusted her hidden camera disguised as a normal lapel pin, her expression serious. I'll focus on the Atlanta-Dallas route since it has a historically high complaint rate. What exactly should I be watching for? Service timing and quality eye contact, tone of voice, physical proximity during interactions, Jasmine instructed. Document every difference between how they treat you compared to white passengers in the same cabin class. And try to engage other minority passengers in conversation about their experiences, but be subtle. As Zoe departed for O'Hare, Jasmine turned to the newest member of their team, Marcus Johnson, a black former flight attendant who had agreed to serve as a consultant. Marcus, take me through a typical first-class service protocol again. I want to understand exactly how Brendan Miller deviated from standard procedures. Marcus walked Jasmine through precise service expectations, highlighting how Brendan's actions from ignoring her requests to the accidental tea spill violated multiple company standards. What he did wasn't just rude, it was completely against training. First-class attendants are taught to lean away from passengers when serving specifically to prevent spills. He had to deliberately move against his training to dump that tea on you. While this investigation continued, another team member was compiling passenger interviews. Daryl Winters, an FAA compliance officer, had set up a discreet operation in the airport to identify and interview minority passengers who had recently flown SkyRoute. We've collected 37 testimonials so far. Daryl reported uploading videos to their secure server. The patterns are consistent across routes and flight crews. Black passengers report being skipped during service, having their credentials questioned despite status, and experiencing random security checks at significantly higher rates than white travelers. Jasmine absorbed this information, connecting it to the broader investigation. What about employee experiences? Any progress there? Tyler looked up from his computer. Breakthrough on that front. 3 former SkyRoute employees agreed to speak with us after signing the confidentiality agreements. 2 flight attendants and 1 gate agent, all people of color who left the company within the last year. He pulled up the interview transcripts. Their accounts are damning. Jessica Chen, former senior flight attendant, reports being repeatedly passed over for international routes despite seniority. Marcus Reynolds, former gate agent, was disciplined for upgrading a black executive to first class, while white colleagues received commendation for the same actions with white passengers. And Tasha Williams, flight attendant for 8 years, describes a culture of casual racism in crew briefings and break rooms. Jasmine studied the interview notes carefully. This helps establish the systemic nature of the discrimination. It's not just passenger-facing issues. It's deeply embedded in their corporate culture. The team worked through the night, fueled by determination and the growing evidence of widespread discrimination. Around 2 a.m., exhausted but unwilling to stop, Jasmine uncovered a critical piece of evidence. "Look at this," she called to Tyler, who was reviewing legal precedents at a nearby desk. "I found an internal memo in the documents we received through our records request. It's partially redacted, but look at this language." The memo sent from SkyRoute's Revenue Management Department to frontline staff contained troubling guidance. When allocating complimentary upgrades or managing overbooked situations, priority should be given to passengers who align with our premium brand image and core demographic profile. This ensures our highest value customer segments receive consistent service aligned with their expectations. They're using coded language, Tyler realized, but it's clearly instructing staff to prioritize white passengers. "Exactly," Jasmine confirmed. "And look at this training document. It encourages flight attendants to use discretion when responding to special requests or service recovery situations. There's even a scoring system that gives more weight to complaints from high-value passenger profiles." As dawn broke over Chicago, Zoe returned from her overnight flight observation with new evidence. "You won't believe what I recorded," she said, downloading files from her hidden camera. "I sat next to an elderly black woman in first class who was completely ignored during meal service. When she pressed the call button, the same flight attendant who had been cheerfully serving white passengers told her to be patient, in a tone that would have gotten me fired at any respectable company." The evidence continued to mount throughout the morning. Tyler discovered that Brendan Miller, the flight attendant who had burned Jasmine, had a concerning service history. 7 complaints from minority passengers in the last year alone, all dismissed as misunderstandings or passenger misperceptions. But 0 complaints from white passengers, despite serving hundreds. More troubling was what Marcus uncovered about Brendan's connections. He's not just any flight attendant. His uncle is James Miller, SkyRoute's Vice President of Operations. Family connections appear to run deep in their hiring practices. Jasmine worked through intense discomfort as her burns continued to throb. Despite recommendations to seek additional medical treatment, she refused to step away from the investigation. "This is bigger than me," she insisted when Tyler expressed concern about her health. "Every hour we delay gives them more time to cover their tracks." Her dedication was tested further when William Foster, the FAA director and Jasmine's boss, called with a warning. "I'm hearing rumblings from upstairs," he said, his voice lowered. "SkyRoute has friends in transportation committees, and they're asking questions about our investigation. Proceed carefully, Jasmine. Document everything meticulously. They'll try to discredit this as a personal vendetta." "Understood, sir," Jasmine replied, her resolve only strengthening. "But the evidence speaks for itself. This isn't about me anymore." No sooner had she ended the call than her email pinged with an anonymous message. "Be careful what you're digging into. SkyRoute protects its own, and they play dirty. Accidents happen every day, even to government attorneys." Rather than intimidating her, the threat validated that she was on the right track. Someone at SkyRoute was worried enough to resort to intimidation. As evening approached, Tyler made another critical discovery. "Jasmine, I've been digging through social media groups for SkyRoute employees. You need to see this." He pulled up a private Facebook group where SkyRoute flight attendants and ground staff shared stories and photos. In a section visible only to confirmed employees, Brendan Miller and several colleagues had exchanged messages that made Jasmine's blood run cold. "Check out today's diversity hire in 2C," Brendan had written 6 months earlier with a surreptitiously taken photo of a black female passenger in business attire. "$10 says she's using someone else's points for the upgrade." The replies were equally disturbing, with colleagues making derogatory comments and sharing similar photos of minority passengers, often questioning their right to be in premium cabins. "This isn't just bias," Jasmine said quietly. "This is deliberate, coordinated harassment of passengers based on race. And it's happening with the company's knowledge, using company time and equipment." The final bombshell came just before midnight when Jasmine received a call from a blocked number. "Miss Washington, this is Amanda Hayes from SkyRoute. I don't have much time. I've been terminated effective immediately and I'm being escorted out of the building. But you need to know, they're destroying evidence." As soon as they discovered who you really are, Richard Blackwell ordered a purge of all discrimination complaints from the past 3 years. There's a recording of him instructing managers on how to handle these situations, how to make them disappear. "I've sent what I could save to your official FAA email. Be careful." The line went dead before Jasmine could respond. Within minutes, her secure FAA email received a large encrypted file from an anonymous account. The sender had included just one line of text: "Do the right thing." Some of us at SkyRoute want change too. Have you ever faced discrimination while traveling? Type 1 in the comments if you've experienced or witnessed unfair treatment on a flight. Hit like if you believe accountability matters in every industry, and subscribe to stay updated on stories of justice being served. The question now is, how would SkyRoute respond when they realized their cover-up had been exposed? Would they attack Jasmine personally, or would they try to silence other witnesses? And what would happen to whistleblowers like Amanda Hayes? Let's find out in the next part of this shocking true story. The morning headlines hit like a thunderclap. FAA investigator claims discrimination after minor beverage incident. Somehow, SkyRoute had not only discovered Jasmine's identity, but had launched a preemptive media campaign to control the narrative. Jasmine stared at her tablet in disbelief as news alerts continued to flood her inbox, each more distorted than the last. "They're framing this as a vendetta," Tyler said, grimly scrolling through coverage on his phone. Look at this quote from an unnamed SkyRoute executive. "We're concerned that a routine service incident is being weaponized by an overzealous regulator with a personal agenda." Jasmine's phone rang. William Foster, the FAA director, calling for the 3rd time that morning. She took a deep breath and answered. "Washington, I need you in my office immediately," he said without preamble, his voice tight with controlled anger. The Secretary of Transportation just got off the phone with Senator Davidson, who happens to be SkyRoute's biggest defender on the Hill. This is becoming a political nightmare. 90 minutes later, Jasmine sat in Foster's glass-walled office overlooking the Chicago skyline. Despite the spectacular view, the atmosphere was tense enough to crack glass. Foster paced behind his desk while two unfamiliar executives in expensive suits watched Jasmine with barely disguised hostility. "Jasmine, this is Gregory Peters from the Department of Transportation's General Counsel Office and Regina Winters from the FAA Public Affairs Division." Foster introduced them with obvious reluctance. "They'll be joining our investigation team effective immediately." "Oversight team would be more accurate," Gregory corrected, his smile not reaching his eyes. "We're here to ensure this investigation adheres to proper procedural standards and maintains appropriate objectivity." The implication was clear. They were there to contain Jasmine and potentially undermine her investigation. She maintained her composure, knowing that showing anger would only validate their narrative of her as emotionally compromised. "I welcome the additional resources," she replied coolly. "Our evidence collection has already revealed significant patterns of discriminatory practices that warrant serious regulatory action." Regina Winters leaned forward, her perfectly manicured nails tapping a folder on the desk. "About that evidence, Miss Washington, there are concerns about potential conflicts of interest given that you yourself are a complainant in this matter." "I became a complainant after the investigation had already been initiated," Jasmine clarified. "And my personal experience has been properly documented and segregated from the broader evidence we've collected from dozens of other affected individuals." Foster cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Regardless, moving forward, all investigative decisions and external communications will require clearance from both Mr. Peters and Miss Winters. The optics of this situation demand extra caution." The meeting continued with Jasmine being forced to defend every aspect of her investigation, while Gregory and Regina identified procedural concerns and potential overreach at every turn. It was clear they weren't there to help, but to constrain the investigation's scope and impact. When she finally escaped back to her team, the situation had deteriorated further. Zoe greeted her with a worried expression and a tablet displaying a breaking news story. FAA investigators' history of aggressive tactics raises questions. The hit piece featured anonymous quotes from industry sources claiming Jasmine had a history of targeting airlines with excessive scrutiny. It even referenced a decade-old college paper she had written advocating for stronger civil rights enforcement in transportation, as if believing in equal treatment were somehow radical or biased. "They're trying to make this about you instead of their discrimination," Tyler observed. "Classic deflection tactic." Jasmine nodded grimly. "And they're just getting started. Peters and Winters are clearly here to slow us down and water down our findings." The team huddled to develop a strategy for maintaining the investigation's integrity while navigating the new political obstacles. As they worked, another blow landed. A senior senator with known ties to the airline industry had called for a review of overzealous regulatory actions that burden American businesses. "They're using their political connections to pressure the agency," Marcus noted. "I've seen this playbook before. Next, they'll start questioning the methodology and demanding impossible standards of proof." His prediction proved accurate within hours when Gregory Peters returned with a list of methodological concerns that would require the team to essentially restart their data collection using narrower parameters. The media assault continued throughout the day. By evening, Jasmine found herself the subject of intense social media criticism, with industry-aligned accounts questioning her qualifications and motives. A coordinated harassment campaign flooded her professional profiles with negative comments, many containing thinly veiled racial undertones. "You need to see this," Zoe said, showing Jasmine a just-aired television interview with none other than Brendan Miller, the flight attendant who had spilled tea on her. On screen, Brendan appeared sympathetic and professional in his crisp uniform, his expression one of pained confusion. "I've dedicated my career to providing excellent service to all passengers," he told the interviewer. "This unfortunate accident has been twisted into something unrecognizable. I immediately apologized and offered assistance, but Miss Washington seemed determined to escalate the situation." The blatant lies made Jasmine's blood boil, but she maintained her professional demeanor. "Save the clip," she instructed. His statement contradicts the audio evidence we collected and the witness testimonies. The coordinated counterattack against their investigation continued to escalate. When Jasmine returned to her hotel that evening, exhausted and frustrated, she found her door slightly ajar. Her heart racing, she called hotel security before entering. The room had been thoroughly searched, though nothing appeared to be missing. More disturbingly, someone had spray-painted a racial slur on her bathroom mirror, a clear attempt at intimidation. As hotel security and local police documented the break-in, Jasmine's phone rang. It was her grandmother, Dorothy Washington, who had been one of the first black flight attendants hired by a major airline in the 1,960 seconds. "I saw the news," baby Dorothy said, her voice steady despite her clear concern. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine," Grandma Jasmine assured her, though she felt far from fine. "Just facing some pushback." "Listen to me," Dorothy said firmly. "When I started flying in '63, passengers would refuse to let me serve them. Pilots would accidentally close the cockpit door on my hand. I found my uniform shredded more times than I can count. They're trying to scare you away because they know you can win." Her grandmother's words centered Jasmine, reminding her of why this fight mattered beyond the immediate case. "How did you handle it?" she asked. "Documentation and determination," Dorothy replied. "I kept a diary of every incident, found allies where I could, and outlasted those who wanted me gone. And I kept the first incident report I ever filed. They claimed it was lost, but I had made copies. Always keep receipts, baby." After the call, Jasmine stared at her reflection in the vandalized mirror, her resolve hardening. SkyRoute and its allies were powerful, but they had miscalculated if they thought intimidation would make her retreat. The next morning brought an unexpected development. As Jasmine arrived at the office, navigating a small group of reporters that had somehow learned her location, her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "Garden area, behind FAA building. 10 minutes. Come alone. Information about SkyRoute you need." Suspecting a trap, Jasmine asked Tyler to discreetly observe from a distance as she cautiously made her way to the meeting point. To her surprise, Amanda Hayes was waiting nervously, scanning the area wearing large sunglasses despite the cloudy day. "I shouldn't be here," Amanda said in a hushed voice. "They're watching me." But I couldn't stay silent. She pressed a flash drive into Jasmine's hand. Internal communications, passenger complaint records they tried to purge, and the training materials we don't show during regulatory inspections. There's a particularly damning email thread where executives discuss passenger demographic management strategies. Their euphemism for discouraging certain types of customers from booking premium services. "Why are you doing this?" Jasmine asked, genuinely curious about the woman's motivation for risking her career. Amanda removed her sunglasses, revealing a bruised eye. "I joined SkyRoute because I believed in customer service. What they're doing isn't just wrong, it's illegal. And when I questioned the document destruction, my boss suggested I might have an accident if I didn't cooperate." She glanced nervously over her shoulder. "I have to go. Be careful with that information. They'll know where it came from." Before Jasmine could thank her, Amanda hurried away. The flash drive felt heavy in Jasmine's pocket, potentially the evidence that could break the case wide open, but also proof that SkyRoute was willing to go to disturbing lengths to cover their tracks. Back at their operations center, the team began carefully analyzing the new evidence, making secure copies before examining the contents. What they found exceeded even their worst expectations, a systematic, deliberate effort to discriminate against minority passengers while maintaining plausible deniability. "Look at this policy document," Zoe said, pointing to her screen. "They actually created a scoring system for upgrades that includes passenger alignment with premium brand image as a factor worth 25 points. It's practically coded language for white passengers preferred." Tyler examined another document with growing alarm. "And here's evidence they retaliated against employees who raised concerns. Performance reviews suddenly turning negative, schedule changes to less desirable routes, eventual constructive dismissal. As they processed the explosive new evidence, Gregory Peters burst into the room, Regina Winters close behind him. "We've received word that you may have obtained SkyRoute documents through improper channels," he announced, his tone accusatory. "Any such materials must be surrendered immediately for review of their admissibility." Jasmine met his gaze steadily. "All evidence in our possession has been obtained through proper legal channels, including whistleblower protections. If you'd like to challenge that, I suggest you take it up with the Inspector General's office. In the meantime, we have an investigation to complete." The standoff lasted several tense moments before Gregory backed down, temporarily at least. But his parting words made the threat clear. "The department is watching this investigation very closely, Miss Washington. Your career is riding on handling this appropriately." As Gregory and Regina departed, Jasmine turned to her team. "They're scared. That means we're on the right track. Let's keep pushing." Despite the mounting pressure and threats, Jasmine and her team worked relentlessly through the night, knowing that the evidence they were assembling could change not just SkyRoute's practices, but potentially set new standards for the entire industry. The personal cost was high. Jasmine had barely slept in days. Her burns were healing slowly, and the constant stress was taking its toll on everyone involved. But as dawn broke over Chicago, bringing news that Amanda Hayes had been hospitalized after a suspicious car accident, their determination only strengthened. This had evolved from an investigation into something much more significant, a battle for basic human dignity and equal treatment that transcended airline regulations or corporate policies. "They think they can intimidate us into backing down," Jasmine told her weary team as they prepared for another challenging day. "But they've forgotten something important. Justice doesn't scare easily." The conference room resembled a war room by day 5 of the investigation. Evidence boards covered every wall, red string connecting related incidents into a disturbing pattern of discrimination. Laptops hummed as analysts processed data, while legal experts drafted preliminary findings. At the center of this organized chaos stood Jasmine, directing operations, despite her still healing burns and the mounting pressure from all sides. "Let's review what we have," she said, gathering her core team around the main table. The flash drive from Amanda Hayes had proven invaluable, providing internal documents that SkyRoute had never intended to see the light of day. Zoe pulled up the first document on the main screen. This is their customer experience management strategy from last year. Look at section 3.2, where they outline passenger profile prioritization. They've created an actual scoring system for determining which passengers receive preferential treatment. The team examined the document with growing outrage. The seemingly innocuous corporate language masked a deeply problematic approach. Passengers received points based on factors including alignment with premium customer profile, long-term revenue potential, and brand compatibility. "They've essentially created a mathematical formula for discrimination," Tyler observed. While they never explicitly mention race, the proxy factors they use, zip codes, name analysis, even ID photo assessments, correlate strongly with racial background. Jasmine pointed to another section. "And here's how they implement it. Flight attendants are instructed to prioritize service for passengers with higher customer value scores, which are calculated using this algorithm and displayed on their service tablets." The implications were staggering. SkyRoute had digitized and systematized discrimination, creating plausible deniability while ensuring minority passengers consistently received inferior service. "What about hiring and promotion practices?" Jasmine asked, turning to Marcus. He pulled up a different set of documents. It's the same pattern. Their team culture fit assessments for hiring flight attendants include evaluations of speech patterns, appearance standards that disproportionately penalize natural black hairstyles, and even judgment of relatability to core customer base. Statistical evidence backed up these findings. Though SkyRoute operated in markets with substantial minority populations, their flight crews, particularly in premium cabins and international routes, were overwhelmingly white. Promotion rates for minority employees lagged significantly behind their white counterparts, even when controlling for experience and performance metrics. "And here's where it gets really damning," Tyler added. their complaint handling procedures. He displayed a flowchart showing how passenger complaints were processed. Complaints from passengers with premium profiles received priority handling and generous compensation, while others were subjected to verification procedures and minimal responses. The team worked methodically, connecting individual incidents to the broader system. What had happened to Jasmine wasn't an isolated event, but the inevitable outcome of a corporate culture that had normalized discrimination. As they assembled their evidence, Tyler raised a crucial question. How do we handle Gregory Peters? He's clearly been placed on our team to obstruct progress. Jasmine considered this carefully. We follow protocol to the letter, but we don't slow down. Gregory can review our findings, but we maintain control of the investigation. If he attempts to interfere directly, we document it and include it in our report to the Inspector General. The confrontation came sooner than expected. That afternoon, Gregory entered their workspace with two SkyRoute attorneys, announcing they were there to review investigative methods for procedural compliance. Jasmine stood her ground. You're welcome to observe, but this is an active federal investigation. Any attempt to interfere could constitute obstruction. After a tense standoff, Gregory and the attorneys retreated to a corner, watching but not directly interrupting the team's work. Their presence was clearly meant to intimidate, but Jasmine refused to be deterred. A breakthrough came that evening when Tyler, who had been working with IT specialists to infiltrate flight attendant social media groups, discovered a private chat platform used by SkyRoute crew members, including Brendan Miller. "You need to see this," he said, his voice tight with anger as he showed Jasmine his screen. The messages were shocking crew members, sharing photos of minority passengers taken without consent, mocking their appearance, questioning how they could afford premium tickets, and even coordinating to provide intentionally poor. Brendan was one of the most active participants, often initiating these exchanges and encouraging others to join in. "This is beyond individual bias," Jasmine said quietly. "This is a culture of coordinated harassment." More disturbing was evidence that supervisors, including Michael Thornton, were aware of these groups and occasionally participated. The discrimination wasn't just tolerated, it was tacitly encouraged by management. As they documented this evidence, the team received an anonymous tip suggesting they should examine recordings of executive-level meetings. Following this lead, they discovered that SkyRoute, like many corporations, recorded board meetings for record-keeping purposes. Through a combination of legal requests and whistleblower assistance, they obtained recordings of a critical meeting where CEO Richard Blackwell had instructed his management team on handling discrimination complaints. "We need to be smarter about this," Blackwell could be heard saying. "These complaints are costly distractions. Train your teams to recognize when a situation might generate complaints and handle it preemptively. Document extensively to support our version of events. Remember, it's their word against ours, and we control the records." The recording provided the link they needed to demonstrate that the discrimination wasn't just the result of individual actions, but was systematically enabled and protected at the highest levels of the company. As they integrated this explosive new evidence, Gregory Peters made another attempt to redirect the investigation. The department believes we should focus narrowly on the specific incident involving Miss Washington rather than these broader allegations, which would require a separate investigation with different parameters. Jasmine faced him squarely. "Mr. Peters, with all due respect, artificial narrowing of an investigation when evidence of systemic violations emerges would itself constitute regulatory malpractice. If you'd like to put that recommendation in writing for the Inspector General to review, feel free." The standoff between them grew increasingly tense until Jasmine received an unexpected call from William Foster, the FAA director. Washington, the Secretary of Transportation, just received a call from Senator Davidson Foster, said, his voice grave. "SkyRoute is claiming we're conducting a witch hunt based on a personal grievance. The political pressure is building." "Sir, with respect, the evidence we've uncovered goes far beyond any personal incident," Jasmine replied firmly. "We have documentation of systematic discrimination affecting thousands of passengers and employees. Backing down now would be a dereliction of duty." There was a long pause before Foster responded. "Send me what you have. All of it. I need to be prepared when I meet with the secretary tomorrow." That night, as Jasmine carefully compiled their evidence for Foster, she received another unexpected call. The number was blocked, but the voice was familiar. "Miss Washington, it's Amanda Hayes. I'm calling from my sister's phone." Her voice was weak but determined. "I heard they've been trying to contain your investigation. There's something else you should know." Amanda revealed that SkyRoute maintained a separate set of records for sensitive incidents stored on a secure server accessible only to senior management. These records documented the actual resolution of discrimination complaints, including payoffs to prevent litigation and blacklisting of passengers who pursued complaints. "The access credentials are in the documents I already gave you, but they're hidden," Amanda explained. "Check the metadata on the customer service manual. The login information is embedded there." This final piece of evidence could be the smoking gun that made their case irrefutable. With Amanda's guidance, they located the hidden credentials and gained access to the restricted server. What they found was damning beyond their expectations. Hundreds of documented incidents of discrimination, detailed strategies for discouraging minority passengers from filing formal complaints, and even a cost-benefit analysis of settling occasional lawsuits versus changing company practices. Most disturbingly, they found Jasmine's own name in a file created just days earlier, with a detailed plan to discredit her investigation through political pressure, media manipulation, and, if necessary, personal attacks on her character and professional history. They knew exactly what they were doing, Zoe said as they reviewed the documents. "This isn't negligence or unconscious bias. This is deliberate, calculated discrimination as a business strategy." With this final evidence secured, the team worked through the night preparing their comprehensive report. They organized the evidence into clear categories: passenger discrimination, employee discrimination, systematic policy implementation, executive knowledge and direction, and attempted cover-up. By dawn, they had assembled an airtight case that not only documented SkyRoute's discriminatory practices, but connected them directly to corporate policies and executive decisions. The evidence was overwhelming and irrefutable. As Jasmine reviewed the final report, a sense of grim satisfaction settled over her. Despite the personal attacks, political interference, and corporate intimidation, they had built a case that couldn't be dismissed or explained away. What had begun with a cup of tea spilled on her face had uncovered a system of discrimination affecting thousands of passengers and employees. She closed the report file and addressed her exhausted but determined team. "Whatever happens next, we've done our job. We've documented the truth and built a case that can't be ignored. Now we need to ensure it's heard." The team knew that the most difficult part still lay ahead. SkyRoute and its political allies would fight furiously to suppress their findings. The public hearing scheduled for the following week would be their opportunity to bring the evidence into the open where it couldn't be buried or minimized. As they prepared for this final battle, Jasmine received word that Richard Blackwell had called an emergency board meeting at SkyRoute headquarters. Their investigation had clearly struck a nerve, and the company was mobilizing its defenses. What none of them realized was that a whistleblower within that board meeting was already recording everything being said, evidence that would prove crucial in the public confrontation to come. The Chicago Tribune's headline was impossible to miss: "Discrimination in the Skies. FAA investigation reveals troubling patterns at major airline." Jasmine stared at her phone screen, momentarily stunned by the development she hadn't anticipated. Someone had leaked key findings from their investigation to Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Eliza Chen. "Did you do this?" Tyler asked, rushing into her office with the same article on his tablet. Jasmine shook her head. "No, but I have a good guess who might have." The strategic leak had Amanda Hayes' fingerprints all over it, calculated to create public pressure just as SkyRoute was mobilizing its political connections to suppress the investigation. The article was meticulously researched and devastatingly precise, outlining the systematic discrimination at SkyRoute without revealing the confidential details of the ongoing investigation. Most importantly, it shifted the focus from Jasmine's personal experience to the broader pattern affecting thousands of passengers. Within hours, the story had been picked up by major networks, and social media was ablaze with boycott SkyRoute hashtags. Current and former passengers began sharing their own experiences of discrimination on the airline, creating a groundswell of public outrage that couldn't be easily dismissed. William Foster called his tone a mix of concern and grudging admiration. "Washington, please tell me you didn't leak this to the press." "I did not, sir," Jasmine replied truthfully. "But the information is accurate." Foster sighed. "Well, the Secretary of Transportation just called. The political winds have shifted. With this much public attention, we can't appear to be sweeping anything under the rug. You have full authorization to proceed with the investigation without interference from Peters or anyone else." This public exposure created a cascade effect. SkyRoute's stock price plummeted 11% by market close as investors worried about potential lawsuits and regulatory penalties. Corporate clients sensitive to public perception began quietly rebooking their executives on competitor airlines. SkyRoute CEO Richard Blackwell was forced to hold an emergency press conference which quickly turned disastrous. Visibly angry and defensive, he dismissed the allegations as unfounded claims based on isolated incidents. When pressed by reporters about specific policies mentioned in the Tribune article, he snapped, "I'm not going to dignify unsourced leaks with a response." His performance only intensified public scrutiny. By evening, cable news panels were dissecting his body language and tone, with commentators noting how his defensiveness suggested guilt rather than innocence. Meanwhile, Flight Attendant Brendan Miller made the critical error of agreeing to a live interview with a major network. Clearly coached to appear sympathetic, he began by expressing regret for the misunderstanding with Jasmine. But when the interviewer pressed him about his participation in discriminatory crew chat groups, he grew visibly flustered. "Those were just jokes between colleagues," he stammered. "Everyone in the industry has those conversations. It doesn't affect how we treat passengers." When the interviewer showed him screenshots of his own messages mocking minority passengers, carefully blurring faces but leaving his comments visible, Brendan's facade cracked completely. "Look, some passengers are more difficult than others," he blurted out. "That's just reality. Sometimes certain demographics have different expectations that aren't aligned with our premium service model." The interview went viral immediately, with viewers shocked by his thinly veiled prejudice. By midnight, SkyRoute had issued a statement reassigning Brendan, pending an internal review, a transparent attempt at damage control that came too late. The public pressure forced the FAA leadership to fully back the investigation. Gregory Peters was quietly removed from the team, replaced by a senior investigator with a strong civil rights background. The Congressional Oversight Committee announced a special hearing to examine discrimination in the aviation industry, with Jasmine invited as the primary witness. As public attention intensified, a remarkable phenomenon occurred. Former SkyRoute employees began coming forward with their own testimonies. Flight attendants, gate agents, and even pilots shared experiences of witnessing discrimination or being pressured to implement biased policies. Many had previously kept silent, fearing career repercussions in the tight-knit aviation industry, but the public momentum emboldened them to speak out. These new witnesses provided additional corroboration for the patterns Jasmine's team had identified, strengthening their case beyond what they'd initially documented. Each new testimony reinforced the systemic nature of the discrimination. The social media campaign Boycott SkyRoute gained celebrity endorsements, with prominent figures sharing their own experiences or expressing solidarity. Competing airlines, sensing a business opportunity, began explicitly promoting their commitment to equal treatment and diverse hiring practices. SkyRoute's board of directors held an emergency meeting as the crisis deepened. Inside sources reported heated arguments about Blackwell's leadership and the company's response strategy. Several major shareholders demanded immediate action to address the allegations substantively rather than continuing to deny them. Jasmine monitored these developments while preparing for the congressional hearing, working with legal experts to organize the evidence into a compelling and accessible presentation. Despite the growing public support, she remained vigilantly professional. knowing that one misstep could still undermine their case. William Foster called her into his office the day before the hearing. "You've done exceptional work under extraordinary pressure," he acknowledged. "But I need to warn you, tomorrow won't be easy. SkyRoute has friends on that committee who will try to discredit you personally. They'll question your motives, your methods, even your competence. Are you prepared for that?" Jasmine nodded resolutely. "I've been questioned and underestimated my entire career, sir. The evidence speaks for itself regardless of their attacks on me." Foster handed her a folder. "These are talking points from our public affairs team. They suggest emphasizing the technical violations rather than using language about discrimination or racism. It might be less provocative." Jasmine glanced at the document and handed it back. "With respect, sir, we shouldn't sanitize what happened to make it more palatable. This wasn't just a technical violation of regulations. It was systematic discrimination that harmed real people. That's what I'll testify to." Foster looked uncomfortable but didn't argue further. "Just be prepared. This has become bigger than one airline or one investigation. There are powerful interests who don't want this precedent established." As Jasmine left his office, her phone rang with an urgent call from Tyler. "We have a problem," he said, his voice tense. "Amanda Hayes was just admitted to the hospital. Her car brakes apparently failed on Lakeshore Drive. She's stable but seriously injured." The timing was too suspicious to be coincidental. Just as they were preparing to present their evidence publicly, a key whistleblower had nearly been killed. The message was clear: SkyRoute, or its allies, were willing to go to disturbing lengths to protect themselves. Jasmine immediately arranged for hospital security and notified law enforcement about the potential connection to their investigation. Then she called Amanda's hospital room. "They're scared," Amanda said weakly. "You must be getting close to something big." "We'll make sure you're protected," Jasmine promised, "and your evidence won't be wasted." That evening, as Jasmine reviewed her testimony one final time, she received an encrypted message from an anonymous source within SkyRoute's board. Blackwell ordered destruction of server records after emergency board meeting. IT, making forensic copies first. Will send when secure. Not everyone at SR supports what's happening. The corporate facade was cracking from within. For every executive willing to participate in discrimination and cover-ups, there were employees with consciences who couldn't remain silent. Jasmine sent a final update to her team before trying to get some sleep before the hearing. "Whatever happens tomorrow, remember that we've already won the most important battle. We've exposed the truth, and it's already changing the industry. Now we just need to make it official." As she settled into bed, her phone buzzed with news alerts. SkyRoute's board had called another emergency meeting, and sources suggested they were discussing a leadership change. The public pressure was forcing action that years of complaints had failed to achieve. Tomorrow's hearing would be the culminating moment of a case that had begun with a cup of scalding tea but had exposed a systemic problem affecting thousands. As she drifted off to sleep, Jasmine felt something she hadn't experienced since this ordeal began, to hope that real change might actually be possible. The Rayburn House office building hummed with tension as Jasmine Washington made her way through security checkpoints. Camera flashes exploded around her, reporters shouting questions about SkyRoute's discrimination allegations. She maintained her composure, focusing on the testimonial folder clutched in her hands containing evidence that would finally bring accountability to an industry that had operated with impunity for too long. The hearing room itself was imposing rich mahogany paneling. The congressional seal prominently displayed television cameras positioned strategically to capture every reaction. As Jasmine took her seat at the witness table, she scanned the room, noting the committee members shuffling papers on the elevated dais before her. Some appeared genuinely concerned, others skeptically distant, and a few openly hostile. Chairman Representative Eleanor Martinez gavelled the session to order. This hearing of the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee's Subcommittee on Aviation will come to order. Today, we examine allegations of discriminatory practices at SkyRoute Airlines and the broader implications for the aviation industry. Jasmine's testimony was scheduled first. After being sworn in, she began with a clear, factual recounting of her investigation's origins and findings, deliberately leaving her personal experience until later. Our investigation has documented a systematic pattern of discrimination affecting thousands of passengers and employees, she stated, her voice steady. This isn't about isolated incidents or individual bias, but rather a corporate culture and policy framework that enables, incentivizes, and covers up discriminatory treatment based on race. She methodically presented the evidence, statistical analysis showing disparate treatment patterns, internal documents revealing biased policies, testimonies from affected passengers and employees, and the digital evidence of crew members. Coordinating discriminatory behavior. SkyRoute created a scoring system that functionally prioritized white passengers while maintaining plausible deniability, she explained, displaying the algorithm on the chamber's screens. They trained their staff to provide inferior service to minority passengers while building in procedural barriers that made complaints from those same passengers less likely to result in meaningful resolution. The committee members' reactions varied dramatically. Representative James Harlow, whose district included SkyRoute's headquarters, immediately went on the offensive. Miss Washington, isn't it true that this entire investigation was prompted by your personal grievance? After a routine service incident, he challenged, his tone dismissive. Jasmine had anticipated this line of attack. The investigation was initiated before that incident, based on a pattern of complaints. What happened to me simply provided first-hand confirmation of what many others had experienced. Yet you failed to recuse yourself despite this obvious conflict of interest, Harlow pressed. There was no conflict of interest. I documented my experience separately and included it with appropriate context. Every finding in our report is independently verified through multiple sources. As questioning continued, the committee's divisions became apparent. Representatives aligned with airline interests attempted to minimize the evidence, suggesting the incidents were isolated or exaggerated. Others, particularly those representing diverse districts, pushed for deeper scrutiny. Representative Maya Jackson, a black woman from Georgia, leaned forward intently. Miss Washington, beyond the documented incidents, what systemic factors allowed this discrimination to become embedded in company practice? The question allowed Jasmine to address the core issues. The problem exists on multiple levels. First, a corporate culture that values certain passengers over others based on demographics rather than actual business metrics like ticket price. Second, incentive structures that reward employees for supporting this hierarchy. Third complaint, systems designed to minimize and dismiss feedback from minority customers. And finally, leadership that views discrimination as a cost-effective business practice rather than a legal and ethical violation. The hearing took a dramatic turn when SkyRoute representatives took the stand. CEO Richard Blackwell had been noticeably absent, sending instead a team of executives, including Michael Thornton, the flight operations supervisor who had defended Brendan Miller. SkyRoute Airlines categorically denies any systematic discrimination, Thornton stated firmly. We maintain the highest standards of customer service for all passengers, regardless of background. The incidents described represent regrettable misunderstandings or isolated failures that don't reflect our corporate values. Representative Jackson challenged him immediately. Mr. Thornton, how do you explain the internal documents showing your company assigns customer value scores that correlate strongly with passenger race? Those scores are based on objective factors like frequent flyer status and purchasing patterns, he insisted. Any correlation with demographic factors is coincidental and unintentional. The committee then called as surprise witness Brendan Miller himself, who had clearly been coached to present a sympathetic image. The incident with Miss Washington was a simple accident during routine service, he claimed, his voice practiced and smooth. I offered immediate assistance, which she declined. Any suggestion that my actions were motivated by bias is simply untrue. His confident demeanor crumbled, however, when Representative Martinez displayed screenshots from the flight attendant chat groups on the chamber screens. "Mr. Miller, is this your account, making derogatory comments about black passengers in first class?" she asked directly. Brendan's face drained of color as he recognized his own words. "Those were private conversations taken out of context," he stammered. "The context appears quite clear," Martinez replied coldly. "You referred to minority passengers as upgrade tourists who don't belong in premium cabins. How does that square with your claim of providing equal service to all passengers?" As Brendan floundered, the door at the back of the hearing room opened. A murmur rippled through the audience as Amanda Hayes entered, walking slowly with visible injuries from her accident. Despite her bruised face and arm cast, she moved deliberately to the witness table. "Madam Chairwoman, I request permission to testify," she announced. "I have additional documentation regarding SkyRoute's discrimination policies and subsequent cover-up attempts." The committee voted to hear her testimony over the objections of airline-friendly members. Amanda's appearance changed the hearing's entire dynamic. As SkyRoute's former head of customer relations, she provided devastating insider confirmation of everything Jasmine had presented, along with new documents showing how the company had systematically buried discrimination complaints. "I personally witnessed executives, including CEO Richard Blackwell, instructing managers to implement what they called passenger demographic management, their euphemism for discouraging minority passengers from premium services," she testified. "When complaints arose, we were trained to offer minimal compensation to certain passenger profiles while fast-tracking others for generous resolution." The most damning moment came when Amanda revealed internal emails discussing the cost efficiency of occasional settlements versus changing discriminatory practices. Management explicitly calculated that discriminatory policies were more profitable than equal treatment, even accounting for occasional lawsuits, she explained. They viewed civil rights violations as a business expense rather than a legal or moral failure. Michael Thornton attempted to discredit her testimony by suggesting she was a disgruntled former employee seeking revenge. This strategy backfired spectacularly when Amanda calmly described her recent car accident and the threats she had received after questioning document destruction orders. "If SkyRoute treats whistleblowers this way, imagine how they treat passengers they've already decided are less valuable," she concluded quietly. The hearing reached its climax when Representative Martinez displayed the recording from SkyRoute's executive meeting, which had been anonymously submitted to the committee. Richard Blackwell's voice filled the chamber. "If these people can't afford first class without our upgrades, they shouldn't be there anyway. Our premium customers don't want to sit next to them, and our job is to create an experience our core demographic appreciates. Just be smarter about how we manage it to avoid these discrimination complaints." A stunned silence fell over the room. Michael Thornton's face drained of color as he realized the extent of the evidence against his company. When questioned about the recording, he could only stammer, "I wasn't present at that meeting," an answer that further damaged SkyRoute's already crumbling defense. Jasmine's final testimony focused on connecting the personal impact of discrimination to the broader regulatory implications. "This isn't just about comfort or convenience," she emphasized. "Federal law guarantees equal access to public transportation regardless of race. When airlines systematically undermine that right, they violate not just regulations but the fundamental principles of fairness our country aspires to uphold." She concluded by addressing the committee directly. "The question before you isn't whether discrimination occurred, the evidence clearly establishes that it did. The question is whether we as a society will tolerate industries treating people as less than equal based on the color of their skin." The hearings gallery filled with affected passengers, former employees, and civil rights advocates erupted in applause. Chairman Martinez had to gavel repeatedly for order. As the session concluded, SkyRoute's attorney stood to make a final statement. "In light of today's testimony, SkyRoute Airlines acknowledges serious concerns about our practices. We announce today the launch of a comprehensive internal investigation and corrective action plan, including leadership changes and policy reforms. We are committed to addressing these issues transparently and completely. The statement was a transparent attempt at damage control, but it signaled something significant. The public exposure had forced SkyRoute to abandon denial and begin acknowledging their failures. Outside the hearing room, reporters swarmed Jasmine for comments. Instead of focusing on her personal vindication, she directed attention to the broader implications. Today marks a beginning, not an end. The patterns we've documented at SkyRoute exist throughout the industry. This investigation should serve as a wake-up call for every airline to examine their practices and ensure they're truly serving all passengers equally. As the crowd dispersed, Jasmine noticed her grandmother, Dorothy, sitting quietly in the back row, tears streaming down her face. They embraced without words, both understanding the significance of the moment not just for this case, but for the decades of struggle that had brought them to this point. "They heard you, baby," Dorothy whispered. "They finally heard you." 3 months after the congressional hearing, Jasmine Washington stood in front of the restored Civil Rights Memorial at Chicago O'Hare International Airport. The glass plaque honoring aviation pioneers who broke color barriers had been relocated from a back corridor to the main terminal, one of many symbolic changes sweeping through the industry in the wake of the SkyRoute investigation. Much had changed in those 3 months, both at SkyRoute and throughout the aviation world. Richard Blackwell had resigned as CEO 1 week after the hearing, following a unanimous vote of no confidence from the board. His replacement, Dr. Elaine Robinson, was the first Black woman to lead a major American airline and had built her reputation transforming corporate cultures as a business ethics specialist. The settlement SkyRoute reached with regulatory authorities was unprecedented in scope. Beyond the record $42 million financial penalty, the airline committed to comprehensive reforms, financial compensation for identified victims of discriminatory treatment with over 3,200 passengers and 78 former employees receiving settlements. Complete overhaul of customer service policies, eliminating the problematic passenger value scoring system and replacing it with transparent, non-discriminatory standards. Mandatory bias training for all employees developed in partnership with civil rights organizations and informed by the experiences of affected passengers. Diversity initiatives for hiring and promotion with specific targets and transparent reporting on progress. Most importantly, the settlement established an independent monitoring system with ongoing oversight from a diverse panel of aviation and civil rights experts who would conduct regular audits and publish their findings. The incident that had begun with tea spilled on Jasmine's face had catalyzed a transformation that extended far beyond one airline. The industry-wide implications were profound, with competitors rushing to examine their own practices and implement reforms before facing similar investigations. Brendan Miller had been fired for his role in the discrimination, but Jasmine had been disturbed to learn he'd quickly found a similar position at another airline. This highlighted the need for industry-wide standards and information sharing about employees with histories of discriminatory behavior, an issue she was now addressing in her new role. Following the successful investigation, Jasmine had been promoted to head the FAA's newly established Aviation Civil Rights Enforcement Division, with expanded resources and authority to investigate similar complaints across all airlines. What had once been handled as isolated customer service issues was now recognized as a potential civil rights matter requiring proper oversight. Today, she was meeting with Amanda Hayes, who had recovered from her injuries and found a new purpose as a consultant helping airlines reform their practices. They had developed an unlikely friendship bonded by their shared commitment to transforming an industry. "I never thought I'd be back here," Amanda admitted as they walked through the terminal. "After everything that happened, I assumed my aviation career was over." "Sometimes our paths take unexpected turns," Jasmine replied. "Your testimony was crucial. Without it, SkyRoute might have continued denying everything." "I still feel guilty for how long I was part of the problem," Amanda said quietly. "All those complaints I processed according to their discriminatory protocols." "You chose to be part of the solution when it mattered most," Jasmine reminded her. "That's what counts." They stopped to observe a training session in progress for new flight attendants, a diverse group being instructed by a Black senior attendant. The curriculum now explicitly included scenarios about providing equal service to all passengers and identifying and addressing bias among colleagues. Later that afternoon, Jasmine had been invited to speak at this training session, an emotional experience, as she described her own incident to people who would soon be serving passengers themselves. She didn't dwell on the trauma, but focused instead on the opportunity they all had to ensure such experiences never happened again. "You are the front line," she told the attentive trainees. "You set the tone for how passengers experience air travel. Every interaction either reinforces or challenges perceptions about who belongs in which spaces and who deserves respect and dignity." A young black trainee raised her hand. "Does it really make a difference? I mean, airline policies are set at the top. What can we do as individual flight attendants?" "Everything," Jasmine answered firmly. Richard Blackwell created discriminatory policies, but it was individuals who chose to implement them enthusiastically, ignore them, or resist them. Never underestimate how your individual choices affect the people you serve. The systemic changes were encouraging, though challenges remained. Some industry veterans resisted the new emphasis on equity, seeing it as unnecessary political correctness rather than fundamental fairness. Old habits died hard, and informal cultures sometimes persisted despite official policy changes. Yet measurable progress was undeniable. Passenger satisfaction surveys showed improvements across demographic groups, with the gap between white and non-white passenger experiences narrowing significantly. Employee diversity was increasing, particularly in supervisory and premium cabin roles previously dominated by white staff. Other airlines had implemented preemptive reforms to avoid SkyRoute's fate, creating a positive, competitive dynamic where companies actually marketed their commitment to equal treatment as a selling point. Industry publications that had once focused exclusively on luxury amenities now regularly covered diversity and inclusion initiatives. 1 year after the tea incident, Jasmine found herself boarding a SkyRoute flight for an FAA inspection trip. She had deliberately chosen the airline to observe their reforms firsthand. As she settled into her first-class seat, she noticed the diverse flight crew watching her with recognition and respect. The lead flight attendant, a young Latino man named Carlos, approached with professional courtesy. "Miss Washington, welcome aboard. It's an honor to have you on our flight today." "Thank you, Carlos," she replied, noting his nameplate. "I'm here as a regular passenger today, not as an inspector." He smiled. "Every passenger deserves excellent service, Miss Washington. That's what we're trained to deliver now consistently for everyone." Throughout the flight, Jasmine observed the crew's interactions with all passengers, noting the equitable attention and service provided regardless of race, age, or appearance. The transformation wasn't perfect, but it was real and substantive. As the plane began its descent, Carlos returned to her seat. "Miss Washington, many of us wanted to thank you. What you did changed things for passengers, but it also made a difference for crew members like me. I was passed over for premium cabin assignments 3 times before the reforms. Now I'm evaluated on my actual performance, not on other factors." His words reminded Jasmine that discrimination harmed everyone: the passengers who experienced it directly, the employees who faced barriers to advancement, and ultimately the companies that limited their talent pool through bias. Back in her office the following day, Jasmine received an alert about a discrimination complaint at another major airline. The work was far from complete, but the systems to address these issues properly were finally in place. Each case built upon the foundation established by the SkyRoute investigation, creating an industry where accountability was becoming the expectation rather than the exception. That evening, she called her grandmother to share the progress and challenges. "It's not perfect, Grandma. There's still so much work to do." "Change never is perfect, baby," Dorothy replied, with the wisdom of her years. "But when I started flying in the 60s, passengers would refuse to let me serve them. Flight crews would sabotage my work. Captains would forget to call me for the pre-flight briefing. Now my granddaughter has transformed an industry. That's not just progress, that's a revolution." As Jasmine ended the call, she reflected on how a moment of humiliation and pain had become the catalyst for systemic change. One cup of tea deliberately spilled had exposed patterns of discrimination affecting thousands. The burns on her face had healed without significant scarring, but their impact would be permanent, not just on her life, but on an entire industry now being held to a higher standard. Justice hadn't come easily or completely. Some perpetrators, like Brendan Miller, had faced minimal consequences. Some victims had never received proper acknowledgement of their experiences. The fight against systemic discrimination would always require vigilance and courage. But something fundamental had shifted. Airlines now understood that discriminatory practices carried significant costs, financial penalties, leadership changes, reputational damage, and increased scrutiny. Equal treatment was becoming recognized not as an optional courtesy, but as a basic requirement of doing business. As Jasmine reviewed plans for her division's next industry-wide audit, she remembered something her grandmother had told her long ago. Justice isn't about changing everything at once. It's about making it impossible to go back to the way things were. By that measure, justice had been achieved. The aviation industry could never return to the days when discrimination was an acceptable cost of doing business. The path forward might be imperfect, but the direction was clear toward a future where dignity and respect weren't determined by the color of a passenger's skin, but recognized as the right of everyone who stepped aboard. Jasmine Washington's story reminds us that systemic discrimination persists in seemingly neutral spaces, like air travel, where equal service should be guaranteed. The most powerful lesson is that accountability requires both individual courage and institutional support. One person standing firm in their truth can initiate change, but lasting transformation demands evidence, allies, and structural reforms. We also learn that discrimination isn't always overt. It often hides in algorithms, protocols, and corporate cultures that create plausible deniability while perpetuating unequal treatment. These systems survive because they're designed to make incidents appear isolated rather than connected. The path from individual injury to systemic justice is never straightforward. Jasmine faced intimidation, political interference, and personal attacks before achieving accountability. Her success came not just from documenting her own experience, but from connecting it to broader patterns affecting thousands. Perhaps most importantly, this story teaches us that change is possible even in entrenched systems when truth is exposed publicly. When discrimination moves from private suffering to public accountability, powerful institutions are forced to respond. The fundamental question isn't whether bias exists, but whether we have the courage and persistence to confront it, even when doing so comes at personal cost. Have you ever experienced or witnessed discrimination that was dismissed as an isolated incident? How did you respond? Share your story in the comments below. Your voice matters in this ongoing conversation about equality and, quote, dignity. If this story about confronting systemic racism resonated with you, please hit the like button to help others find it too. Subscribe to our channel for more powerful narratives about everyday people standing up against injustice and creating lasting change. Consider sharing this video with someone who might need to hear that their experiences matter and that accountability is possible even against powerful systems. Sometimes, knowing we're not alone in our struggles gives us the courage to speak up. Thank you for joining us in this exploration of how one moment of discrimination became a catalyst for industry-wide transformation. May we all find Jasmine's courage when confronted with injustice, and remember that our individual actions can spark collective change.